Hi, I'm Billy Keels, the host of the Going Long podcast. Every week, I'm going to be here interviewing the absolute best in the business as it relates to real asset investing, as well as real Main Street investors. We're going to be having conversations where you can listen in, and that's going to help you to continue on your path to education so that you feel much more comfortable as well as confident in investing long distance. So make sure that you go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you're liking it as well, because that way you can get every single episode as soon as it comes out. And by the way, don't forget to leave today's episode a 5-star review. Let's go ahead and listen to today's conversation. Welcome to the Going Long podcast, where we're back once again to continue to help to educate you so that you feel much more comfortable as well as confident investing beyond your backyard. I'm your host, Billy Keels, and if you've ever wanted to know why self-storage can make a perfect fit in your long-distance investing portfolio, then today's going to be the conversation that you're going to want to listen to until the very last word. You know why? Because today's guest not only started out his career as an investment analyst and also an associate portfolio manager, he is also a third generation Seattleite that's married with 2 children and also spent a lot of his time in the financial services industry. And today he's the investment relations manager at Spartan Investment Group. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome to today's conversation, Mr. Ted Greene. Ted, welcome to the show.
Hi, Billy. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be on your show and connect with you and your listeners as well.
Yeah, so this is going to be a lot of fun, and I know that we talked about Spartan Investment Group, and I know also too it's recently named as one of the America's fastest growing companies in the Inc. 500. So that's a lot of that's happened since we've had actually Ryan Gibson on the program as well, which is fantastic. And so it is great, Ted, to have you here. And as you probably already know, we love to get to know each one of our guests. And typically I like to ask everybody at least the same 5 questions. You're going to get 2 in the beginning, you're going to get 3 in the end, and in the middle, you're going to help to educate us on a lot of really fun stuff, and we're going to get a chance to know a lot more about you. So with that stated, help us understand, Ted, where exactly do you live in the United States?
So my wife and I and our 2 children live in Seattle, Washington, which is on the West Coast, separate and distinct from the other Washington, which is Washington, D.C. on the East Coast. So anyway, we're West Side.
Very cool. So you're on the West Side, and I actually spent a fantastic, I think it was like a week or so in Seattle many years ago in the month of August, and it was phenomenal. I was downtown, and there was I think it was a Four Seasons or something like that. It was an amazing place, just really, really amazing. So thank you for...
My office at Merrill Lynch was across the street on 4th Avenue at 1215 4th Avenue. So
no kidding.
We may have been crossing the same sidewalk or something.
We'll talk more about that one once we finish the conversation. That's great to know. So starting out there, and then also to helping us understand, you're in Seattle, and then love to start out with positivity as well, Ted. So help us understand, what's the most positive thing that's happened to you in the last 24 hours?
So Spartan has started to test Facebook ads, and we've had a surprising result from a brief test that we did with Facebook ads. And when I was looking at the numbers this morning, I'm really happy. Don't know how else to say it. This stuff works.
Yeah, believe it or not, there's I think it's almost a $1 trillion market cap or market valuation of Facebook, and this is maybe one of the reasons why, because some of it works. Yeah, strange that, right? No, so that's fantastic, and I appreciate you sharing that with us as well. It's nice to wake up and see that the numbers and the actions that you put in place give positive feedback, which is a good thing. So, listen, Ted, and I did at a very, very high level. I wanted to talk and help the Going Long family get to know more about you. And one of the things is I always try to do that in like probably 10, 15 seconds, but it's almost impossible. I give myself a task that's almost impossible to tell your backstory in 10 seconds. So would you do us a favor and help us get to know you even that much more and give us a bit more about your background? And if you can also focus, Ted, on some of the different decisions that you've made to get to this point in your journey. And then once you finish, you and I will pick it up and see where we go from there.
Sure, sure. So I grew up again here in Seattle, and the college that I went to is called Seattle Pacific University. And when I was a junior at SPU, two investment advisors from Merrill Lynch came and gave a talk, and they were looking for an intern. And I found it to be very intriguing and interesting, and to just kind of paint a broad picture. After that talk, that was winter quarter, and on New Year's Eve, I was so intrigued by what those guys were talking about in the internship. On New Year's Eve, friends were heading out to do what you do on New Year's Eve when you're in college, except, dork Ted wanted to stay home and reread my finance and investment textbook. And, it didn't really occur to me what that indicated at the time. But my passion, my interests, my hobbies, kind of focus around investments in general. So anyway, after graduation, I continued my internship at Merrill Lynch, and it took me a year and a half of working for free, a couple of days a week. But I finally got a job as an investment advisor for Merrill Lynch. It's an interesting, the business of risk. Everybody responds differently to challenges. I think something everybody should keep in their back pocket is an awareness of there's two ways to react to adversity. So when something goes wrong in your life, in your marriage, at your business, what have you, when something goes wrong, there's two ways to view it. One way is to say, who did this to me and how can I get them? And that's the wrong way to look at it. I think the right way to look at adversity is, where did I go wrong? So try to evaluate my own behaviors, evaluate the situation. Maybe too much risk was taken. And I mention that because in my late 20s and early 30s, when the dot-com bubble happened, I had an investor who had several $100 million. He was a Kiewit construction engineer. In the 80s and 90s, when Kiewit was building the freeways across the United States, they would put big pipes that later would carry fiber optic cable. When WorldCom and Level 3 Communications went public in the late 90s, suddenly the private stock of Kiewit Construction Company, which owned parts of WorldCom and Level 3, was worth an incredible amount of wealth. And so, Joe Average was suddenly worth a lot of money. A couple of $1 million was routine and customary, and this individual had several $100 million. So, fast forward a little bit, when the dot-com bubble burst and Bernie Evers, who was the CEO of WorldCom, turned out to be committing fraud, when a portfolio of a couple $100 million changes into something much less, one of two perspectives can come about. Where did I go wrong? Or who did this to me? So, as was typical in the early part of the 2000s, I had a couple of lawsuits. They resolved in the favor of Merrill Lynch and myself. But there was real scar tissue that I gleaned from that, from the perspective of, if I have all my eggs in one basket, so in other words, if I just have my career on Wall Street, and if I just have my investments in the stock market, you reap the rewards of that, but you also can be damaged by that. And so I think that was a real pivotal point where diversity, the wisdom of diversity, the benefits of diversity really started to take hold in my personal life. And, I'm now in my early 50s, I'm 52. And so I don't see the world from the lens of a 30-year-old. I see the world from the perspective of a 50-something-year-old with teenagers leaving for college. So, risk and reward, we're always going to be wrestling with it. You never have it mastered, but diversity is a perspective that was stamped like all over my body for the sake of just simple emotional well-being and peace and calm at home. It's a thing, man. It's a valuable thing. So continuing on after Merrill, a friend of mine and I started a self-directed IRA facilitation company. We subsequently sold that to a crowdfund investment portal called Yield Street out of New York. As my contract ended after the sale, while I was still at WealthFlex, I had gotten to know Ryan Gibson, who you mentioned that you had met 2 or 3 years ago. And so when my contract was ending with Yield Street, I reached out to Ryan, and I think I'd probably helped 100 investors from Spartan Investment Group move assets from, for example, a Fidelity account into a self-directed IRA where you can make private investments. So anyway, Ryan and I, we get along great. I was able to come across from Yield Street and start with Spartan about a year ago, and so here we are today.
So there's a lot of things that we can talk about. So everything from being able to start your own business, sell that business, to be able to also help while you own the self-directed IRA custodian, that you are helping people to move money from what I like to call Wall Street to Main Street, which I personally think is a very good thing. And also having that career with Merrill. It was something that's really interesting that you said, Ted, because I understood you to say that you gave of your time you said that you worked for free for a year and a half. When you said, and I guess my question is, because this is also to a lot of what we talk about here has to do with mindset. So when you look back on it now, do you still feel like that you gave of your time? Because it's a little bit different. Like I know you said that you gave of your time you worked for a year and a half for free. But do you still feel today that you worked for free with that first internship?
I worked for free. I learned an incredible amount, and I so benefited from my time at Merrill Lynch. I'm thoroughly convinced that 99.9% of the people in this world are fantastic. They're helpful, they're genuine, they're sincere. I can say that for everybody I came across at Merrill Lynch. I mean, Merrill is a world-class company. But so I benefited tremendously from that and turned that into, I think I worked there for 16 years. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's an answer to your question.
So it is, but and I guess what I love about the mindset, right? Because a lot of times this happens less and less today, because when you talk about the business of risk, at least one of the first lessons as I'm listening to you and that we get to know you even more is you took a risk in the beginning, because you said, okay, well, you wanted to have this opportunity because you heard about this company and they came in and you were like, okay, cool. And you decided to work for free, quote unquote, which many people do not do that anymore. Unless you're getting a paycheck, people don't want to work in general, right? And it's probably an overarching statement and stuff like that. But you were willing to say, hey, look, I want to actually learn something. So I'm going to give of my most valuable asset right now, which is time. And I'm going to be given the opportunity to learn something. And you did that for a year and a half. But when you gave of your time and you demonstrated your value, at that point in time, there was an exchange that said, okay, listen, Ted, you've been able to create a lot of value here. We want to bring you on board. Is that accurate? Is that kind of what happened?
Literally, the hiring manager, whose name was George Cohn, sweet Jewish man, maybe 5'2", the most powerful booming voice ever. Anyway, he told me, Ted, you're just not going to go away. So Ed Pilateri decided to hire you. Full stop. It's like bananas.
Yeah. So, and that's the whole point, right? Because of all the different things that you were saying, and I can appreciate that. The one thing that really caught my attention was, hey, listen, we're talking about someone who worked for free, quote unquote, but you were really giving of yourself, of your most valuable asset, of your time. You were benefiting. The company was also benefiting. And after you did the work for a year and a half, then there was a compensation, if you will, in terms of being paid salary for your time. And I think a lot of times we kind of forget about those types of lessons. Sometimes you have to do the work up front, and then the reward or the compensation shows up on the back end, provided you're actually adding value. So with that, I've not really heard someone put it to like that before, that we're always dealing in the business of risk. So kind of with that understanding that has a lot to do with your training and the things the way that you envisage the world, especially now in the investor relations manager role. What I'd love for you to talk to us about, because we have a lot of really high paid professionals that are listening and driving and running on treadmills and cooking dinner or doing whatever they're doing while they're listening to us, right? And it's probably been a while, or maybe they haven't really known a lot about self-storage, even as a potential investment opportunity. So what is it about self-storage that lends itself to someone who potentially is interested in, hey, listen, I like what I'm doing on my day job, but I don't want to invest any more of my money in the stock market. The multifamily real estate thing, I get it, but not really. Help us understand a little bit more about self-storage. Why is this such an interesting and growing area?
Yeah. So currently it's July of 2021. And at Amazon, we've just had a change. So Jeff Bezos is no longer the CEO. The baton has been passed. And in just the last 3 weeks, I think Amazon stock has gone from $3,000 up to $3,650-ish, something like that. That's a dramatic change. And I can tell you, if you could see the emotional scar tissue on me, that the stock market can cut both ways. And when it cuts on the other side of the coin, it's much more damaging and impactful. And I've sat at the kitchen table with the 65-year-old while both mom and dad are crying because of the value of their investments. It's their life's work. By way of storage, the way we evaluate a project is to calculate the future value of a project where, we may have 700 units or 1,000 storage units. It's usually an ongoing business that we purchase. So there's going to be an existing net operating income from the business. So as we evaluate the saturation level of how many competitors are in a marketplace, how full are they, what dimension types do they have, how hard is it to get a conditional use permit and go ahead and construct additional units. So for us, with that information, we're looking for facilities where we can add additional storage units, just literally construct additional storage units on the existing real estate that we're buying, so that we might take the net operating income at a given location from $12,000 per month to maybe $20,000 per month. So the way we calculate what the future value of that asset might be is to divide the delta, or divide the change in net operating income, which is $8,000. Remember, we're starting at $12,000, we're ending up at $20,000. So the incremental is $8,000. So divide that $8,000 by 0.055, and the cap rate for storage right now is 0.055. Mm-hmm. So 8,000, and actually I forgot the step, multiply that 8,000 by 12, because that's the number of months in a year. Mm-hmm. So 8 by 12 has got to be something like 100 or 108,000.
Yep.
So
96,000.
Say it again.
No, yeah, 96,000, 100,000. Let's call it 100,000. Yep.
Yep. Okay. So, and then Billy, if you could just, one more calculation, divide that 96,000 by 0.055. And the answer to that question is going to be the increase of the market value of that storage asset. So by any chance, do you have your calculator? Do you know what that number is?
I do not have it right in front of me. But
we'll put it to the user, and so Mr. or Mrs. User, 96,000 divided by 0.055, that's the increase and the market value of the asset that, and that's just a very real world type of example of what self-storage does.
So here, I'll go this way. I just did this really quickly, and I think that's roughly 1.75 or 1.7 million.
So yeah, and I think it's actually going to be more like 10,750,000, just because. Just because it's.
See, there you go. Don't let me do the numbers anymore.
Yeah. Well, no, you're all good. But the point is, back to the stock market. Amazon changes its CEO. Boom! Suddenly, you've got a 20% bump in stock in 2 weeks because of good news. Well, what happens when bad news happens, and what happens to what happens emotionally when you're 52? And you've got a $4 million 401k, and then the Fed decides, well, we're no longer going to buy $120 billion in government bonds and agency bonds and all the rest of it. And, what happens? What happens monetarily? What happens emotionally? What happens to the conversations between you and your spouse, you and your children? Layer on top of that occupational hazard if things at work are slowing down, and maybe a year ago you were not at risk, but now you are at risk. I mean, everybody sees where I'm going with this. So in storage, if we buy the right property, and at Spartan, that's the key. We find and buy the right property. So we have 3 people that just do business intelligence. That they're not doing part-time accounting, they're not doing part-time construction. They're just doing business intelligence, research on assets that we're evaluating. We tend to buy 1 or 2 properties each month. Anyway, the point is, if you find the right asset to buy, it's got room for expansion. That's called value add in the commercial real estate business. So it's a value add opportunity. We can bump up that net operating income by $8,000 per month. Kaboom! Now you've got a asset whose market value is more. And I'm not saying worst case scenario, but what if things don't go swimmingly well, and instead of being able to sell it at a 5.5 cap, maybe you sell it at a 7 cap. Well, okay, so your internal rate of return, as opposed to being 15, maybe it's knocked down to a 12. So you just didn't make as much money. I mean, if the stock market will go down 50% in the dot-com bubble and 70% in 2008 to 2011, there's real legitimacy to just give it a look. And I'm not saying to investors, look at self-storage. I'm saying if you're just in the stock market, look at retail, look at multifamily, look at industrial, look at storage. Take 6 months, put together a list of 4 syndicators that you want to get to know over time, because you don't get a do-over in life. I guess that's what.
Yeah, and so that and those are really valuable lessons, right? And here you're going to get a lot of support for don't keep all of your money in the stock market, because I fundamentally don't believe keep all your money in the stock market. You need to have it in tangible things that you can actually see. And well, we could go on forever and talk about what happens with debt and all the money that they're printing, and why you should have it in types of assets that actually will help to hedge against inflation and all these types of things. But I'd be preaching to the choir, some sort of speak. And so part of that is helping us move along that path, Ted, because it's being out of the stock market and it's being in something that is tangible, right? And so a lot of times when there's people that are living outside the U.S. or even people that are living in the U.S., we tend to get inundated with multifamily residential, because we all understand that. I mean, I'm even in that boat myself. At the same time, I believe self-storage is a fantastic place, especially with the dynamic that takes place in the U.S. And when you're speaking to investors or managing relationships with investors already, sometimes I'm sure you get people in the beginning that are going, well, I kind of would like self-storage is something that's new and it seems like something, but I don't really know enough about why I should take more time to study. You've just given us some interesting numbers, and of course you're just giving us numbers. You're not giving anybody any like predictions or what this can happen, but saying, if you had double-digit type of returns. But I still keep coming back to that question of, Okay, well, what is it about self-storage that should intrigue me, or why should I want to study more specifically around self-storage?
Yeah, here's just real world examples that we've experienced at Spartan, in the last, 14, 15 months during COVID. Um, Probably 30% of our tenants are business owners. A good example is a butcher who wants to have climate controlled lockers inside of a storage unit that they can access from outside. So in other words, they're keeping inventory at the storage unit frozen, as opposed to at their retail footprint, which I don't know. I don't have an analogy on what our square footage expense that, well, our square on basically we're at $8 a foot for tenancy. I don't know if they're paying 35 or 50 at the butcher shop, but just keeping inventory with us, makes a lot of sense. At the same time, we had business owners that were closing their shops during COVID and, foregoing a $1,800 a month or $2,000 a month payment for a retail footprint that was non-revenue producing. And they stored stuff with us at, $120 or $150 a month. It just makes sense. People move. It's just the reality of it. So, and think about the last time you moved. Last time I had to move, use a storage unit for 3 months, and they were great on my transition away from them. If I'm living in the same city, which I probably will be, I'd probably use the same place again. Suffice it to say, it seems to be recession resistant as an asset class. The stock market, you may find opportunities in the stock market in a recession. If Amazon were to poke around at the $2,200 or $2,500, I know the earnings are growing at about 80% per year, which is fantastic. So I might find opportunities in the stock market in a resistant, but I don't want to give up a lot of ground as we go from the upcycle to the trough of a recession. And so the stock market, it's going to give up ground. And as we all age, that magic rule, that oh so wise rule of thumb, take your age, put a percent sign behind it, and that's the percentage of your assets that you should have in fixed income. Well, right now, fixed income by way of the bond market, there's nothing there. It's all bid up in price, and it's you're getting one, or the 10-year government bond right now here in the U.S. is paying 155 or ish. So, is a syndicated multifamily, industrial, retail, or self-storage asset that pays a 7-pref, could that be a surrogate for a bond? Maybe. The point is continuing to move to stable assets and continuing to reduce your risk profile. I think there's a lot of wisdom to that.
And so aside from a lot of the wisdom that is there, what I love about what you just helped us to think about, especially for those people, because a lot of times, we want to understand, like, what's the use case? Like, why would someone want to use this? And so what we've typically heard, Ted, is I'm moving from one place to the next. I need to keep my things there for about 3, 4, 6 months, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You've also just helped us to understand a different use case. It's the business owner that has specific type of equipment that they need to keep on site, but then they need a specific type of climate control to keep other types of equipment nearby, but not necessarily on site. And when they're able to do it in a way that is much more economically viable for them, then it becomes a no-brainer. So that means if I'm looking to invest in the type of self-storage facilities that provide these types of services or that are attracting these types of clientele, it gives me a diverse client base, which means that I'm not putting all of my eggs in one basket for the types of revenue. Because when you start talking about things like net operating income, well, you're talking about all the revenue streams that are coming into the business and then figuring out what are the operating expenses that are going out to the business. Because at the end of the day, and I know that I probably didn't do it right earlier, but when you start to divide that by whatever the cap rate is, that's what you're talking about, the valuation on the specific asset that you're investing in that is holding your future dreams, goals, et cetera, et cetera. So you've helped us to understand a couple of different use cases for this particular type of an asset, which is self-storage. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's very meaningful The older you get, the less risk you should be taking with your investments. Hard assets really speak to that need.
Yeah, they definitely do. And so speaking of which, and I know that right now at Spartan Investment Group, there's a lot of activity happening. There is a lot of growth happening. And you tend to, and this is something that I find is a very positive thing. It's a way that you've gone to market with a lot of value add type of opportunities, which you were talking about now. And also, one of the things I've started to see is that you're doing much more development. So, and when I say development, meaning you're purchasing the land and doing the construction ground up for brand new facilities. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about that as well, because when you're thinking about it from an investor standpoint, and depending on where you are in the country, and if you can give us a geographical kind of idea, because this is the Going Long podcast, so we love being able to help people invest beyond their backyard, and we're talking about real assets. So maybe talk to us about the development versus the value add and how that is playing into the overall the self-storage facilities that you're doing, as well as the geographical locations, but just at a high level, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Yeah. So from a physical location perspective, we are in Florida. I'm going to start on the East Coast and come west. So we're in Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Arkansas, Colorado, soon to be Utah, Texas, and the state of Washington. And we will go wherever the business is that is being sold. But we'll set up shop there and take over that asset and develop it. As far as the new construction versus value add, let's go to the end of the equation and then kind of backfill with what the equation actually looks like. So here's the answer to the question. The Department of Labor in the summer of last year, and I actually I wrote an article on this that's on the Joe Fairless website for Buy with Conviction is the title of the article. But the Department of Labor changed the ERISA laws, which govern 401k, 403b, 457 plans last summer. The Department of Labor now allows commercial real estate to be an asset class that is owned by 401k plans in their life cycle funds. So a life cycle fund for, let's say I was very disinterested in the stock market, and so I just picked in my 401k plan, 2030 is the date I want to retire. So the administrator of the 401k, they're going to manage the asset allocation within my personal account and squeeze down the risk as I get closer to 2030. So there's 2035, there's 2040, 2045, so you've got a lot of assets are held in those types of target date funds. Mm-hmm. So currently what's happening, the private equity firms, they talk to the 401k administrators about what the appetite is for commercial real estate. So that's one conversation PE firms, private equity firms are having. The other conversation they're having is with syndicators like us. What do you got that's coming up? Can you deliver to us a standardized portfolio? And what are the asset types? And so we're having those conversations with firms like Blackstone, and we know what types of assets are desirable to 401k plans. So we're starting with, okay, let's either acquire or build the type of asset that can be delivered into the hands of the PE firm that's going to end up in a 401k plan. And here's the interesting thing about this. Interest rates are low. Everybody knows that. 5.5 cap for self-storage right now, everybody sees it. For a portfolio of $250 million of standardized, desirable assets that are self-storage, the cap rate is 4.5%. So the institutions are willing to pay a 4.5 cap for the right type of asset that, it's the value add process. It's got to be behind. Now it's built out. It's now stabilized. It's running on the common software. It's running on Oracle's enterprise accounting software. But the point is, these are stabilized, desirable assets. So back to the question, we started with, well, what does the market really want to buy? high quality assets. Doesn't have to be in a major city. It could be in a tertiary market. But if it's valued at $25 million, tenancy is full, the demographics around that asset, there's migration coming in for strong business growth, people moving in, decent wage growth in the area. Any 401k plan would want to have a piece of that. And, so back to the question, Billy, we're building what the market really wants to buy in a couple of years from now.
And so as soon as you say that, what it makes me think about is Stephen R. Covey, which talks about, start with the end in mind, and also very similar to our tangible assets is what are the potential exits? And as you start to think of the end with the end in mind and who the potential, end users could be, I guess, for lack of a better word, because I also come from a software background, it makes things much easier as you begin to plan out and hit your specific milestones because you are working towards potential exits, which make a lot of sense. And ultimately, it is what you said. It's what the market is asking for. So that makes a lot of sense. And I cannot believe that the time flies by so quickly, Ted. I literally I want to keep on asking you and talking to you about I have so many more questions, but the thing is the time is so limited, and we got to get to the going long final three. So the thing is, I never ask anybody the going long final three unless you tell me that you're ready for me to ask you. So my question to you, Ted, is: are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, here we go. Listen, so the very first of the going long final three has to do with bringing you back from the west coast of the United States over here to Europe, and we started with you in Washington, the state, and now I'd like for you to share with us what is your favorite European city that you've either visited or is still on your bucket list to visit.
So I'll try to get through this without getting emotional, but I'm not going to make any bets on that. A few years ago, I lost my brother to a heart attack. His daughter was in high school at the time and had a trip planned to Paris. So he passed, not long after she went to study abroad in Paris. It was super fun to connect with Casey from, almost halfway around the world and get her text messages about the places she had seen, what was going on during the day. And we just worked through it together. So I want to go to Paris. I want to see some of that stuff that I experienced through my niece in a really difficult chapter. So to me, that would be heartwarming.
Ted, first of all, I appreciate your sincerity, vulnerability, and honesty with us about that. So thank you first and foremost. Yeah. And the other thing is I have a very special place in my heart for Paris as well, because my 1-year sabbatical that started 20 years ago, 3 countries, 4 language, prior to my marriage and 2 children, it all started in Paris. And so I also have a very special place in my heart for Paris. So we'll have a conversation. We'll meet up face to face, and we can share more stories about Paris, because it's an amazing place. So
I feel you.
Yeah. And so with that, the one thing that I do want to kind of say is getting into question number 2, one of the things that I've always noticed about really successful people is that they're successful primarily because they've only made one mistake their entire lives. And that's kind of why they're really successful. I get that question wrong every single time, Ted. I'm starting to think it's by design. Okay, it is by design. No, so here's the thing. You're a successful person. So many people that are successful are just like everybody else. They make loads of mistakes, probably more than most. The thing that successful people do that is different is they take a moment to actually learn from the mistakes. So I would love for you, if you could just share with us quickly, from a mistake or a learning opportunity or however you want to call it, what's the one lesson that you would pay forward to the Going Long family?
Yeah, so I, probably more than most, I've made lots of mistakes. During my professional career, I tried to start a cogeneration power plant. It went horribly wrong. My wife and I, we lost over $1 million. It was really painful. a few minutes ago, I mentioned the notion of either, trying to figure out who did this to me, or where did I go wrong? Mm-hmm. And so I think the emotional response when we all deal with adversity is, as opposed to trying to find the guy or find the person who they're the villain, they did this to me. Let it go, evaluate where you went wrong, start moving forward, and don't wait till all of your problems are gone to be happy in life.
Love that. Don't wait for them to be gone. I love it. Wow, I can't believe it. So we're at the last question. Ted, okay. This is amazing. I can't believe it, man. I'm going to get more time with you though offline once we're finished here. But listen, I like to help everybody feed our brains. So what is the one book that you would recommend to the Going Long family?
So there's a guy that he's on LinkedIn quite a bit. His name is R.E.I. He started Bridgewater, which is one of the most successful hedge funds that there is. Yep. And he's really a giving person. One of his best books is a book called Principles, which is a great way to organize your life. Yep. His most recent book is a book called The Changing World Order. And he's very concerned about the amount of debt that the United States has. And if you have 20 minutes in your car, punch up YouTube, How the Economy Really Works by R.E.I. Dalio. And it's just a quick teaser to the debt cycles. So how to succinctly answer the question. I think the Changing World Order should be on everybody's list of things, of something to read, because debt can be a real killer. And the United States right now has a lot of debt, and we all want to be able to handle whatever comes next as best we can.
All right, fantastic. So the Changing World Order, and how the world works, right? Or how the economy works. How the economy works. Yeah, I've seen that. It's a really good one on YouTube. So, I'm actually thinking, Ted, just from you sharing early on, and you're really starting with the whole thesis of the business. You're in the business of risk. You started thinking about when you recognized this conference or this conversation, and you realized that you wanted to be an analyst and you wanted to get into Merrill Lynch, and so you worked for free, quote unquote, for a year and a half. Eventually, they recognized that exchange of value. It was something that was important for you. You did that for a number of years. Then afterwards, you decided you wanted to go out and do something on your own, and so you started up your own company, your own business. You helped people to understand that there were other options outside of Wall Street from an investment perspective, all the time keeping in line the business of risk. You have since, once that business was sold, then you also were helping people. You built relationships, and now as the investor relations manager, I get tongue-tied sometimes, with Spartan Investment Group, you are continuing to add value to so many different people. You've helped to give us a high-level masterclass today on the self-storage asset, why it's there, and how the benefit can be derived. Obviously, Spartan Investment Group is nationwide at this point. And I know that so many people are thinking to themselves, wow, I'd love to get in touch with Ted. I just don't know how. So Ted, can you help me and the Going Long family understand what's the best way to get in touch with you to find out more about you, more about what's happening at Spartan Investment Group?
Yeah. So, and by the way, thank you for the generous comments. I'm pretty sure I'm not deserving of all that, but thank you. I'll take the pleasantries. So Spartan Investment Group can be found at spartan-investors.com. And probably the best way to track me down is LinkedIn. So my name is Ted Greene. I have an E on the end of Greene, and I'm affiliated with Spartan Investment Group. So we're out of the phase where we're tender and at risk, and we're now up on a plane with 50 employees, and we're always looking to talk with investors who might have a couple of bucks to diversify. And so I'm your guy.
All right. Fantastic. Well, listen, Ted, you made it very easy for us. I appreciate it. And like I said, definitely reach out to Ted. He makes himself available. When you reach out to him on LinkedIn, make sure that you let Ted know that you listened and watched us here on the Going Long podcast. It's just going to make it a lot easier for you, the two of you, to continue the conversation. So with that, listen, Ted, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for investing your time with me and the entire Going Long family today. Thank you very much.
Had a great time. Hope to see you soon.
Yeah, definitely. Want to meet up with you face to face. So if you give me just a couple seconds, Ted, I just want to say some closing remarks to the Going Long family. Listen, Ted left so much value once again today, helped understand strategy, helped understand tactics, helped to educate us on self-storage, gave us some great use cases. And you know that that the conversation that we had today, someone that you know needs to hear this conversation, at least 2 to 3 people. So take your iPhone out of your pocket, go ahead and send and share today's episode with 2 or 3 other people. Be that person that has a positive impact on someone else's life, and be that person of influence that was going to help them. And since you have your phone out already, why don't you take just a couple seconds to go ahead and leave us an honest review, what you thought about today's conversation, what you think about the podcast in general, and also go ahead and leave a rating, an honest rating and review. We'd appreciate that so very much. And until then, I'm really looking forward to welcoming you back on the very next conversation. So like I was getting ready to say, until then, go out and make it a great day. And thank you very much. Wow. Don't you love hearing from top-notch experts in the field? When I was getting started, I really wish that I would have had access to such experts. And even more, I wish they would have given me like a really simple list of things to follow so that I could have gotten to my goals much faster and been much happier even sooner. So that's why I've created for you the 7 things that you should avoid in order to be successful in long distance investing. And you can pick that up really easily by going to billykeels.com/7 things to avoid. And also, if you liked today's episode, don't forget to leave a 5-star review. I'm looking forward to seeing you on our very next episode, so go out and make it a great day.